I'd like to apologize in advance for my voice during this episode. We recorded it the day after Frost Week, and seeing as I was #going hard, my voice is a tad scratchy. So please focus on Mohammed's beautiful voice over the course of this interview. And welcome to That Thing I Did for a Year. This is a podcast where we interview University of Toronto students on interesting things and adventures that they had away from home for a year. So we'll probably be starting with a lot of PEY, professional experience year students who had interesting experiences at home and abroad. We might branch out to other parts. My name is Ilya. I am a University of Toronto industrial engineering student in his fourth year. I also went on PUI, and I'm very, very interested in the experiences people had, what they learned, and how they've changed. Behind production is Arkady Hungaratsky, another U of T engineering science student in fourth year, and the mastermind behind the whole operation. Now, for our first guest, we have Mohammed. Mohammed, why don't you introduce yourself?
What's up? Hey everybody, my name is Mohammed. So I'm a fourth year industrial engineering student, and Ilya and I are actually classmates. So what do you want to hear about?
I just like if you could tell people a little bit about where you went on PUI and how that came about.
Yeah, for sure. So I was very fortunate in PUI. I was able to do 4 internships in tech in 4 different cities. So San Francisco, Toronto, London in England, and then Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, I did 4 different internships. One at Facebook, the first one at Facebook, then the next one at Drop, which is a startup in Toronto. The third one at Facebook, but this time in London, and then the fourth one at Microsoft.
Right. And what were you doing primarily?
Sure. So the first 3 internships were as a software engineer. And so a lot of what I did was just coding on whatever different apps and features that we were working on. And then the last internship at Microsoft was as a program manager, also colloquially known as a product manager, where essentially I helped create the specs for a feature that we're going to be releasing in the future.
Cool. So this is, I think, really interesting because you took a path that is against what most people call a professional experience year. Usually students do at least 12, if not 16 months with a single company. So I know you put a lot of effort into actually seeking out these job opportunities. I know that's something you're quite passionate about. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I've been very fortunate in that I've had a lot of good people push me. And so one of the things that I quickly realized was that I wanted to work in technology. And kind of looking at the different sort of internships and opportunities in technology, I realized all the big technology companies offer 3-month internships. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, and because I knew that getting big company experience was important, I thought, okay, let me see if I can try and line something up. And so what I did is that I think I applied to 1 to 200 different big tech companies. And of those 1 to 200 applications, I think I only got 2 or 3 or 4 interviews, one of which was with Facebook. And so I did the interviews, and I guess they liked me enough to give me an offer. And so what ended up happening is that I got my sort of summer experience down, and then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I had known that a lot of people had done the 4-month internship thing, and for me, what I realized is that I was like, okay, I have Facebook now. What if I just kind of do that and then come back to school? But a really good friend of mine, Daksh, was like, no, you have to really realize that this year is the best opportunity for you to learn and explore and grow and try different things. And so he kind of pushed me to try different things. And so what ended up happening is that right before the summer, I was able to kind of reach out to different companies in Toronto because I wanted to come back home. And I got a job with a company in Toronto called Drop.
What does Drop do?
So Drop is a company. They have an app where you can link your credit card or your debit card, and essentially what they do is that they can track your purchases and give you points and rewards based upon where you make purchases, and these rewards can then be used to redeem for like gift cards and other rewards.
Similar concept to something like Air Miles. Or
Yeah,
cashback from credit
exactly.
cards.
So it's like Air Miles for like the 21st century.
Right.
Drop was a really cool place because they're at a stage where they were pretty much raising like a really big Series A, and I actually got to be there during that time and see what happened when they signed the term sheet and all of that. And then later on, whenever all the news broke out a few months later, because they had like a controlled press release, I was like, yeah, I was there.
Yeah, you were excited about that. I'm definitely going to ask you more about your experience at each of these companies, but I think something interesting to talk about is how you built yourself up to the point of being able to contribute at these places.
Yeah.
Because you were an industrial engineering student where while we learn programming and we have some tech skills not typically associated with being like hardcore developers at these kinds of companies, and you also didn't hang your hat exclusively on academics.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit through the journey you had towards wanting to be a developer at these kinds of places?
So one thing that I'm really fortunate for in my life is that I have a lot of really great mentors and people who kind of have been helping guide me throughout school. One of which was an upper year insights named Shams, and essentially he started a company and it got acquired, and he was kind of the CTO and the main tech person in the company. And so throughout university, one of the things that he kind of pushed me to do was learn how to code. And so as a result of that, what ended up happening is that I was kind of through different projects that he'd give me or different things we do together, I kind of slowly learned how to learn the basics of coding. And then the summer of second year, I was lucky enough to somehow land an internship at a startup in Toronto called Shoelace. And essentially that is where I feel like I learned a lot, because it was working on a company with I think 3 or 4 developers at that time, including me. And so it was very small, and because it was a startup, things had to move very quickly. We had to ship code very frequently. And so as a result of that, that whole summer was literally me putting my head down and just coding away. So through that, I learned a ton. And the good thing about that was that because I learned a ton, I also was doing my own research on the job application process, because I really wanted to work at a big company, because I realized that working at a small company, while it provides you a lot of opportunity to execute, it doesn't provide you with the mentorship and the growth and the sort of rigor/structure that a big company provides.
Right.
And so I was okay, let me see if I can go to a big company and let me see what the process is like. And so in figuring out the process and in figuring out all of that, I was able to apply really early. And in applying very early, I was able to kind of know exactly what each and every single interview had. And so even though I only had a few interviews, I knew exactly what to expect. And I had practiced so much to the point where I was just super prepared, and I knew how to ace every interview I had.
So what does that practicing and figuring out the process actually look like?
So it's a really weird process. Part of it is understanding the sort of person that these different companies look for. So one of the things that I realized kind of early on in school is that I'm pretty average when it comes to U of T engineering. You go through high school and you're just oh, I'm tough shit. I'm one of the smartest kids in the class. I know everything. And you go to university and you're wow, all these other people are the same thing. I'm actually pretty dumb. And so just realizing that was really helpful, because it made me realize that it's not just about marks, because there are infinitely smart people everywhere, but it's the smart people who do things with that smart, and it's what you do with that smart that really matters. And so for me, I slowly tried to get involved in around school and try to get involved in and around my community. And so part of preparing, I guess, was like being able to like get involved, learning different skills. So for example, in first year, one of the things I did is that I helped with Your Next Career Network, which is this like student organization that's kind of devoted to career development. By going through that, I learned a lot of these sort of like skills that it takes to reach out to people, like sending cold emails, things like that. And those skills like translate really well to like the job hunt. In terms of like actual like interviewing skills as well, there's like a lot of resources online that you can look at. Like for example, there's tons of like different like write-ups people have written. Like for example, there's this one called Getting a Gig, and that's like on GitHub or something where you can actually find written out these sort of steps to like getting an internship. Also, there's this really amazing book that everybody calls the Bible called Cracking the Coding Interview by Gail Lockman McDowell. That's like literally the Bible for like tech software engineering.
Right.
And so, well, like the thing that I did a lot of was like reading that, understanding the interview process, doing mock interviews with people, just really like drilling down on what it means to really interview for these companies and figuring out what these companies are looking for and trying to sort of like exemplify it.
Gotcha.
But the thing for me is that even though that was the case, I feel like for me, a lot of the things I do are things that I kind of want to do for myself. And so I would like pick things that I want to do that were interesting to me as opposed to things that would like bump up my resume.
Right.
Coincidentally, those things overlapped. So I guess like the main thing that you need to focus on is like making an impact in some way, wherever you are, and making sure that you deeply understand what it is that your career path is looking for, and make sure that you are super prepared so that whenever you get your opportunity, like you get your one shot, you just kill it.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's get into the internships themselves. So your first one was at Facebook.
Yeah.
And I remember the moment when you got that internship because we were about to go into an exam and you called me and you sounded like you had just drank 10 cups of coffee in a minute. And like you had a voice that would fit Bugs Bunny. And you were telling me about that. So you were really, really excited about that.
Yeah.
How was your experience there? Like the first time in California?
Yeah. It was pretty awesome. I think one of the things that I personally do that's like really difficult is that I tend to like overemphasize on the goods and like de-emphasize on all the bads. So without a doubt, there were like struggles. Like it was the first time that I really had like moved away from home because I commute to school, and so it was my first time where I was like fully away from my family. For context, like I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and we all live at home with our parents, and so big house, lots of people, very loud, and so like going from that to like small house, only me, really quiet, was very difficult, because you go home and it's just like pin drop silent, and that's nice for the first few days, but then afterwards you're like, wow, where is everybody? So I definitely like felt a bit lonely, but it was super enriching because I was like fortunate enough to meet a few cool people, and we hung out over the summer. And like the work itself, like going to work at Facebook is like an experience because you go there and it's literally like Disneyland. Like literally the person who designed Facebook Campus is actually the person who designed Disneyland, which is ridiculous. And like you go and you like walk around and you feel like you're in this like really cool creative place. And everybody around you is like super helpful, and like there's an experience to it, and you just feel super empowered to like build things. And like the thing that I'm really happy about and really proud about is like over the summer I was able to build something that actually released and people actually used it. Like so what happened is that I was able to like take part in that process of releasing it, and I saw there was like millions of people who actually used the feature that like I had built, and just like thinking about that was like mind-boggling.
That's amazing. Are you allowed to talk about what it is?
Yeah, it's much less impressive whenever I talk about
you're clearly excited about it.
So essentially, like on Facebook. So I was on the Messenger team, Facebook Messenger. So essentially, in Facebook Messenger, there's this feature where if you wish somebody happy birthday, you'll get a suggestion to like do a few things. One of those suggestions is to like send somebody a birthday photo. So whenever you click on sending a birthday photo, you get these filters where it says happy birthday and then it has the person's profile photo on it. And essentially I had built like the back end so that was possible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why everybody who knows me always gets these really weird, wacky birthday photos from me because like I built that, and so I gotta propagate that everywhere.
Oh, that's fantastic! Looking forward to that come February. So the next company you worked at was back in Toronto.
Yeah,
and you worked at Drop.
Yeah.
So talk about like that transition between working at this like tech wonderland at Facebook and then coming back to a company that was doing big things, but with less than 20 people.
Yeah, so I think there was like 20, 25-ish people whenever I got to Drop. That was really exciting because you could see everybody in a room, and so you could get involved with like different parts of what the work we were doing, and that was really cool. Just like being able to know what's going on in the company, like totally, and like the company being super transparent and like super open with how things are going, and knowing that things are going really well, and knowing that you're contributing to that is pretty awesome. And like the other thing that was pretty cool was that because there were such few people, like your work counted a lot more. Like even whenever I was interning at Shoelace, I realized this, where I wrote a lot of the code that was like foundational to like the company. In like, I guess like it sounds kind of bragsy, but like, for example, one of the things that like Shoelace did is that they started sending messages to people for whenever they created a marketing campaign for people, and like I wrote the baseline like code that allowed us to send SMSs to people, which sounds impressive, and I feel it's cool. Yeah, but like again, take it with a grain of salt. Because what looks impressive sometimes isn't actually that impressive. And
right, there's a difference between whether the result is impressive and whether it was actually hard to do.
Exactly. There's like a big disconnect there where like sometimes the hardest things to do, the results are not all that impressive. But like other times, the sort of things that are very easy to do are able to have like huge results.
Right. I remember when we were talking about this in first year, way before you got as deep into tech as you are now, and we were talking about imposter syndrome, and about how prevalent we were talking about it in our lives. I've heard from a lot of people that imposter syndrome is a big part of the tech industry. So for context, imposter syndrome is the feeling that you don't deserve to be where you are and that you are faking it while everybody else is real. And once people find out how much of a fraud you are, you're going to be kicked to the curb. So that's imposter syndrome.
It's like literally you think you're an imposter.
Right. As is well said. Did that ever hit you in your time?
Yeah, for sure. Every single day. I don't know, like, the weirdest thing for me is, like, I see a lot of these things that I'm doing, and I'm like, damn, this isn't, like, all that impressive, like, you know, because you can kind of, like, break it down to its little parts and be like, okay, like, this isn't inherently difficult. And so, like, for me, personally, the thing I struggle with is, like, especially in tech, like, right now, there's a lot of money poured into it, and so, like, people are easily making a good amount of money. And that kind of scares me because, like, whenever I think about it, I think about, like, 95% of all software engineering jobs, in my personal opinion, they're all relatively the same. And
what does that mean?
Like, a lot of the work that you're doing generally is very kind of repetitive, and it's, like, repetitive in the sense that, like, it's not inherently difficult. It's, like, just, like, doing the same thing over and over again. To be more, I guess, concrete, Imagine if your job is to be a mathematician. I don't know what mathematicians do, so we're going to make this up. Imagine if your job as a mathematician is to integrate random things or like derive, like take a bunch of functions and just derive them.
Right.
Now, in the beginning, like, it might be a bit hard to like derive these functions, but you slowly like learn the tips and the tricks. You're like, oh, if it's a sine, then maybe you can make it into cos, and like, if it's a cos, you do a negative sign, and
Sure.
like you learn the tips and you learn the tricks, and eventually things just become routine, and nothing really is a curveball, right?
Right.
And so, like, to other people, it might seem really cool. Oh, this guy, he's like deriving everything, like he knows everything. But in actuality, there's like just a very few number of skills that you kind of need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, it just feels like you're just repeating them. Now, with that said, it's important to realize that, like, software engineering as a discipline isn't just about the coding. It's about everything that comes around that. It's about, like, how do you build a system that is scalable? How do you design things in such a way that over time you can use them without, like, things messing up, and that they're extensible? How do you work with other people around you and leverage everybody around you so that, you together as a team are building something great? How are you influencing younger members of the team as you become more senior?
Right.
And so all of these other skills are like auxiliary. But I guess for me personally, like, the thing that's really difficult is realizing that, like, all this coding stuff is, like, not all that hard. And sometimes people, like, look at me as though I'm a wizard because it's like, oh, he worked at Facebook. But I'm like, the work I did at Facebook was no different from, like, the work I did at Drop.
Right.
It's just that Facebook has a really big weight associated to its name versus, like, Drop, which is really doing well right now and still has a big name, but is not nearly as a big name as Facebook.
Right. So that's interesting. I think we're told a lot that, like, soft skills are more important than hard skills, but most of us, think that that's not quite true with highly technical jobs, a lot of engineering jobs, and you didn't find that.
Yeah, I think the one thing with big companies that's really interesting is that for big companies, you need certain big company skills to succeed, because at that point, because they're such a big company, they can just, like, pool in talent. They can just, like rake in talent.
Yes.
And so as a result of that, there's probably going to be somebody smarter than you.
Mm-hmm.
And as with school, you have to do something to, like, make yourself stand out. And so often at times that means, like, getting visibility on your work. That means, like, figuring out how to leverage other people with your work. Mm-hmm. Which might not be as, like, savory as, like, just sitting and, like, crushing code. Mm-hmm. But those are skills that are necessary to do well, because whenever there's, like, thousands and thousands of super smart, talented people around you, you need more than just being able to code, because you need to be able to coordinate all these people, and you need to be able to make sure that everything's running smoothly and that everybody is on the same sort of wavelength.
So I'm interested in your third internship, so the one after Drop. You were back at Facebook in London. So were those corporate rules similar to the corporate rules in San Francisco, given that it was the same company?
For sure. London was weird in that, like, I feel like in London they tended, I wouldn't say higher standards, but they seemed to be a bit more relaxed but intense. Okay. So, like, people would all, like, kind of leave at 5, like, straight up leave at 5. Whereas, like, at Facebook in Menlo Park, which is in California, people would kind of just, like, trickle out. Like, I remember my team, they'd work like 10 to 6 or something, which is more relaxed. But in London, people are more, like, prompt. The other thing that I realized is, like, in London, I wrote a lot more code and, like, I was a lot more productive.
Was that just because you had already learned the Facebook infrastructure from the last term?
Exactly. So I knew the stack and I understood exactly how everything works. I knew what sort of systems I could use and leverage to do a better job. And so I think I think I was able to, like, double my code line count, which sounds impressive again, but take that with a grain of salt, because I still shipped a feature, but, like, I shipped a feature in my previous internship as well. So it's like, but people in London still seemed like it felt Facebooky, but, like, different, because there were cultural differences, right?
So, such as?
So, I remember distinctly having this conversation with a product manager. She was like, so whenever I talk with London or people from California, it's always really difficult for me. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she said that basically in North America, it's pretty normal to, like, call out people. So you'll like, suppose if you'll like present your ideas, somebody else will be like, no, you're wrong. And then like go on to prove you. Whereas in the UK, they tend to be a lot more passive aggressive. And so they won't be like, you're wrong. They'll just like slowly start poking holes in your argument and be like, something seems to be wrong here. And so they're a lot less like direct. And so you could kind of tell where sometimes like people were being less direct. But the interesting thing about the Facebook London office is that they have people from like all over Eastern Europe, like Europe in general. And so because of that, there was a lot more different types of people, which was fun and interesting to kind of navigate around.
Oh, interesting. Actually, let's dig in on that diversity for a second. Because I would imagine in Facebook's California office, there were people from many different racial and cultural backgrounds, but most of them were like hyphenated North American, be it American or Canadian.
Yeah.
Versus perhaps like visually, there wasn't as much diversity in the London office, but there were people who came from significantly different cultures.
Yeah,
fair to
sure.
say?
Yeah, so like for example, there was a lot of people from Eastern Europe. Even within the intern class, like there was a bunch of Brazilians for some reason. There was an American and the Canadian me. There was somebody from Poland, somebody from a bunch of people from Ukraine, somebody from Germany, like literally like just countries.
Just the United Nations, but coded.
Yeah, basically like within the 17 sort of interns, I think there was like 5 to 10 different nationalities at least. And that's crazy because like everybody you would meet in Facebook Menlo Park, for the most part, would be from Canada or America.
Right.
So that like level of diversity was there, which was really cool because you got to like learn from different people from different cultures, and just like interacting with different people is really interesting.
Do you like the nature of the work that you did at Drop and Facebook, where you were like a strong individual contributor with respect to like you're building the foundational part of the product?
Yeah, I think that was fun. The one thing that I realized is like, as a software engineer, your primary job is to code. And so if you do well enough in that, you have the ability to kind of like reach out and branch out a lot. But the sort of like, the pitfall of that is that because your primary job is to code, you spend a lot of time doing independent work and you don't get much visibility with a lot of people.
Right.
You have to seek that out yourself. And so it takes a lot of initiative to do that. And like, that's a thing I need to work on, which is like having that initiative beyond just like initiative within the scope of your work.
So that initiative is something like, hey, person I admire, my name is Mohammed, I'm working on this, and this feature. What's up?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Being able to reach out to people, being able to talk to different people, understanding different perspectives, especially in a big company, what ends up happening is that because there's so many people who know other people, like usually are able to like get things done a lot quicker than people who are not. Especially if you're working on something that is cross-disciplinary.
Right. As most tech projects tend to be.
Yeah, like I think Facebook has done a really good job of like making product teams independently self-sufficient. So literally within a team, you'll have people working on server and you have people working on client, which is essentially the two groups of people that you would need to like actually build something.
Right.
Whereas like in different other companies, things are set up differently. There might be a lot of external dependencies, which makes it a lot more difficult to be shipping things.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
let's transition to your last internship, which was with Microsoft in Seattle. So you were not a software developer in this case. You were a program manager, a product manager. So your primary job was no longer to ship code.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about what a program manager at Microsoft or in general does?
Yeah. The one thing about PM, which is really interesting,
PM being product management
or project or product management or program management at Microsoft, they're pretty much the same. The funny thing about PM is that like every time you talk to a product manager, you get the same sort of like wind of the mill answers. The one answer that you'll always hear is like every day is different. The other answer is that you get to work with a lot of different people. The other answer you get is like, my job is dynamic. No day is the same. Like,
right.
you know what I mean? Like, you just get these like run-of-the-mill
but
answers.
none of these people are paid to be dynamic. Like,
Yeah.
certainly there's more of an output than that.
Yeah, exactly. So like that was the weird thing, right? Like, you go in and you're like, as a product manager, you have to deal with ambiguity, and I'm like, okay, that's ambiguous. Like, come on,
deal with it.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, so I think the one thing that I realized is that a lot of these like in jokes are actually like pretty much truths. So as a product manager, you work on a lot of different things. You're able to get a lot of visibility into a lot of different meetings and stuff, because what ends up happening is that product managers are the ones that set the direction of things. And so part of setting the direction of things is understanding where your thing fits into the bigger picture. And part of that is knowing everybody who works on everything and knowing roughly what they're working on.
So, like, there's some context. In the technology world, a product manager would be, like, in ways, if not hierarchically, a leader of a team of technologists who are working on a product or a part of a product.
So the thing about product management, which is really interesting, is that you have what's called influence without authority. Mm-hmm. So nobody actually reports to you per se.
Right.
But you have to still like influence people's directions. So it's like a weird sort of like middle ground.
Right. So you're responsible for making sure all of the communication, coordination, and little things that are required for the product to happen. Happen.
Exactly. So part of what I did is that like I met up with a bunch of different people on teams that were partnered with our team, so that I could understand what they're working on, understand how the feature I was making kind of fit into that. The other thing that I did is that I had to I had to like write out specs for like the feature that I was assigned to help make.
So a spec is a specification.
Yeah.
So what you are building.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like describing from like end to end what we're building, how it looks like, how it feels. I had to like make mocks of it, which was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of my job, what it ended up being, is that it was a lot of like ad hoc stuff, and it was very like self-directed.
Right.
Because like I had to like understand what it is that we needed to do in order to get something starting to be built. And so it's like about like meeting different people, getting buy-in from different parties, and like making sure that like everybody is like clear on what we're building, and then like kind of tossing it over and helping in the process of building things. So one good example would be like the developer who was working on my project. He had a bit of problems with like the API, which is sort of the thing you use to help build what we're building. And so I had to go and find the person who made the API, mm-hmm. and be like, hey, we're having this problem. Can you please help us?
Right.
And so it's like a lot of little things. And so it was like a different sort of experience, because as opposed to being the person building things, you're enabling people to be building things.
Did you prefer one over the other?
That's a good question.
It doesn't have to have so straight an answer, but...
Yeah, I think it's complicated. The fact that as a product manager you get like experience and sort of like exposure to a lot of different things is amazing. Because seeing how different things are moving and seeing how products are made is really fascinating. It's also very empowering, because if you know what you're supposed to be working on has been worked on already, you can like leverage that. But the thing is that sometimes it feels like, because of the fact that you can't actually do the building, sometimes it feels like you have like a hand tied behind your back, because you might have all these great ideas, but you have to like ruthlessly prioritize and make sure that what we're building is the right thing, not just a thing that would be cool.
Right.
Whereas as a software engineer, you just work on really cool things all the time. Or at least
cool things selected for you by those self-same product managers.
Like, you see, so it's like a catch-22, really, right? Like, being a PM is great because, you get to pick what we're making, but you don't get to make it, which is like part of the sort of like in my opinion, some of the exciting parts of actually doing things is like actually being able to make it, right?
Was that one of the advantages of being at a smaller company? The fact
Yeah.
that you somewhat manage your own product?
Exactly. So at a smaller company, it's really cool because there's such few people and there's so much work to happen that like you can actually take ownership over features.
Okay.
Also, the other thing that I slowly kind of realized is that even as a software engineer, you can do a lot of like the product management yourself. In that, like you can because you're building the product day in day out, you understand the product end to end, and so if you have ideas, you can actually just build them and then be like, hey, PM, I made this thing in my spare time, check it out.
Mm-hmm.
So like the ability that you have to sort of do different things and take different parts in the process of building things is all on you. I think what it comes down to, again, is initiative. Having the initiative and the ability to kind of see things and like understand how to like do the right things in order to get what you want done. Mm-hmm. So that could be like finishing all of your normal work quickly so that you can tinker with other things. Or it could be doing your normal work really well in a way that you become the go-to person that everybody goes to for building things. It could be as a product manager, knowing what everybody's up to and maybe tinkering on the side if you want to. But I think in general, like as much as these positions are very static in that like the software engineer's job is to write code, a product manager's job is to like ship products. I feel like they're actually a lot more intertwined than you realize.
Right. And
in a smaller company, it's even more intertwined because there's so few people that you can literally do both.
Right. And that means you take on more of that responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
So something interesting that happened early on in our conversation is when I asked you to talk about your PEY, you didn't start with the companies. You started by saying you got to work in 4 different cities.
Yeah.
And that seems like something you were quite excited about. So could you talk a little bit about that, especially like moving? That's a pretty radical way to move away from home, which is to just move around like to 3 different places that aren't home over 16 months. So like, what kind of effect did that have on you? What was that experience like?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things is that like I like starting with like the cities as opposed to company names, is because one of the things I've noticed is that whenever you say a company name, people are like, "Oh, damn, he works at Facebook. He must be super smart." And like, I don't really like that. I guess like this is like imposter syndrome at its finest, where like I'm like I'm not actually that smart. Like I didn't actually do anything that impressive.
Right.
Like I don't want you to think that I'm super smart because I'm not. Or at least in my head, I don't think I am. But living in many different countries is difficult, but it's also awesome.
Makes it difficult.
So one of the things that you don't realize, or at least I didn't realize, was that one of the most important things about like living in one place and like having your home is that you build up like a network of support. So you get friends, you have family, you have all these different sort of people who are like sort of in your corner to help you, and that provides you with like a degree of sanity. And it also provides you with a sort of safety net, because like whenever you fall down, you have people that can help you back up. Whenever you move away, that's gone, and so you tend to feel very lonely.
Right.
And that can be very difficult if you don't take steps to make that better. So whenever I was interning, one of the things that I noticed was that like there were times when I felt very lonely. Like London specifically, it was like really difficult because of the fact that I was literally 5 hours ahead of everybody, and so whenever I would wake up, everybody would be asleep, and whenever I'm ready to go to sleep, everybody's at work. And so by the time everybody's like ready to phone call me from home, it would be like midnight for me and like 7 p.m. for them.
It's hard to connect with people.
Exactly, and that was very difficult. That being said, like living away from home is awesome, especially in like a lot of these amazing places. Like whenever I was in London, I was able to visit more countries than I ever had in my life. So I went to London. Went to London. I went up north to Scotland. I went to Paris for a weekend. I went to Copenhagen in Denmark. I went to Hungary, Budapest. I went like all these different places, right? And I was able to like visit them because Europe is very close, and that was something that I'd never been able to do in my life. The other thing that's really cool is that like because you're interning in different places and because you're trying to meet a lot of people, you end up making a lot of cool friends. Like, so I interned first in San Francisco and I made a bunch of really cool friends. And then whenever I was interning in Seattle for one weekend, I flew down to San Francisco just to meet my friends. So like the fact that you're able to like build relationships with people from all around and then like keep those relationships is really, really cool. Because you have like friends everywhere. Also, being able to be in a new city is awesome because you get to explore that new city with these people, and you sometimes actually build like really great bonds with people. Like for example, whenever I was in Seattle, there are these two friends of mine, Ali and Akshay, and literally we spend almost every waking minute outside of work together. Like literally after work, I go straight to their house because they're roommates. And some days they'd like be asleep and they just leave their door unlocked, and I just walk into their house and just like chill on their couch.
Right.
And so like literally you build such deep connections with people and like deep bonds with people, and you miss them after that. And it's like a very special time because you will never be with that group of people in that specific place together with that amount of like free time and ability to do things than that moment.
The way you're describing this is very similar to the way people would describe university.
Yeah.
Like first year university, and like what you described sounds like res. Do you think there are some similarities there?
Yeah, for sure. I think that like for me, because I didn't really have that sort of like university experience in that sense, where I was
just because you're a commuter.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like this was like my sort of like university. Moving away from home, packing your bags,
right.
Going to a new place, trying to make new friends, trying to like do well in school or work. Mm-hmm. Like all of those sort of things are like real life skills that you gain. And so for me, I felt that I got a lot of like personal growth out of it, because going from like living at home and like not actually doing anything at home to like moving out, making your own food, doing your own like laundry, and like having to worry about like living is completely different. Mm-hmm. And it's awesome because like you feel proud. Like I remember my cousins visited me whenever I was in San Francisco, and like I had a home. Like I let them come and stay with me, and like I cooked for them eggs in the morning, and like it was nice, like feeling like an adult.
Some real adult shit.
Yeah, adulting, man. Adulting is so scary, but like, it's pretty cool sometimes. Like all of these things that like I would have not experienced if I had lived at home. Because if I had a job in Toronto, like for example, when I was with Drop, I lived at home,
right?
And so all these different things that you couldn't experience, right? Like the ability to kind of be impulsive about things, and like there was this one weekend whenever I was in Seattle where literally like 2 or 3 days before the weekend started, we're like, oh, let's go on a trip. And so we went on a road trip just like impulsively.
Where to?
We went to, so what we did is that we drove down to this national park in Oregon called Crater Lake. And then what we did is that we spent the day in Crater Lake, and then we drove all the way up the Oregon coast and then back to Seattle. Right. So it was literally like a lot of like road trip time in the car and road tripping. And it was just a ton of fun because it was like A, impulsive, B, like everybody was just trying to have a good time, and like C, the fact that we were able to like just experience nature in like a very raw form was awesome. Because like as we're driving, like for example, we see something really cool, we can just hop off, and you're driving in the middle of like forests, and like whenever you're driving up the Oregon coast, literally you drive and you park somewhere and it's all green, and then you go up the hill, and then on the other side there's just sand because it's like a beach, and it's crazy. Like where did the sand come from? It's like real like nature in its like raw form, and that's amazing.
Right.
And so like being able to like be impulsive about things like that and being able to like have that sort of level of freedom was really cool. And I imagine a lot of people experience the same thing whenever they come to university, because they go from like living in their parents' house to living on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So like my version of that was moving away to work.
Gotcha. What do you think is the biggest difference, or like a big difference, apart from the confidence of living alone, between you before PUI and you after?
I think for me, the main thing was like realizing that there's so much out there. I grew up in Toronto. Sure, we do like a lot of family road trips and stuff, but like it's a lot of like family stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're like on your own, you're like out there to explore. You see a lot more, and like I learned a lot more about like myself and things that I like to do. So one of the things I love is like going to a new place and like eating a lot of good food.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I love is like going and seeing art. So like particularly for me, the thing that I find really interesting is street art. So one of the things I did whenever I came back to Toronto is that I went to Graffiti Alley, because I'm like, street art, that's cool. I've never done that, but I gained like a newfound appreciation for it. Also, I better understand sort of like my rhythm in terms of like how I operate on a day-to-day basis. What are the things that make me tick? And I think the most important thing for me that I learned is that I had a series of questions that I wanted to kind of answer. And every single sort of experience I had their own sort of like inbuilt sort of lesson.
Can I ask what those questions were?
Yeah. So one of them was like thinking about like what's the difference between living at home versus living away from home.
Right.
Another question was all about like big company versus small company. Mm-hmm. And the third question was like, what's the difference between product management and software engineering?
Uh-huh.
While like I don't think I've completely answered those questions, I've like made inroads and I've learned more questions that I should be asking.
Right.
The other thing that I realized is like every single internship I learned like a major thing.
Right.
And those major things really like I think they're gonna stick with me.
Uh-huh. So can I probe into that? What were those major things?
Yeah, so my first internship was like my first time away from home. I was in San Francisco. And so I kind of learned that like living away from home can be pretty cool. There's a lot of like freedom, and like that's really awesome because you're able to set your schedule. Gotcha. And so I kind of like I guess for the first time jumped into the idea of like what it's like to not be at home. Mm-hmm. The second internship was in Toronto, and so working at Drop, one of the things I realized is that the best way to kind of succeed, especially in tech or in anything really, is to like be super passionate about what you're doing. Right. And so like I could see that in a lot of my coworkers where they truly believed and cared in the mission and vision of the company.
Gotcha.
And so like I learned that that's something that I really need to look for is people who care, and also for me personally, looking to see and find companies where I can truly invest myself into whatever the company is doing. The third internship in London at Facebook, I learned that like you can be pretty lonely on your own, and I learned like even whenever your job is awesome, if you don't have the right social structure around you and you don't have the right level of support around you, it can be pretty bad. That was like a thing that I truly struggled with, which was like being lonely in London. And like it's funny because a lot of people would like come to me, like a lot of people would be like, "Oh, damn, you spent like a semester away in London with like a lot of money and you were able to like do weekend trips. That must have been amazing." Mm-hmm. But like a lot of the times I was like super miserable because like I missed home and I missed family and I missed friends, and like people don't realize that.
Right.
But I learned that it's important. And so going into my fourth internship, I kind of like took everything that I kind of learned, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to focus really heavily on meeting a lot of people. And I was going to focus really heavily on like making sure that like the way I did my life was like something that I really liked and enjoyed. And one of the things for me that I realized is that I really like operating in sort of a framework of minimizing regret.
Right.
And so like doing things like crazy things even sometimes, but in a way that you know that like whenever you get old, you're like, oh, I did make the most of the opportunities in front of me. And so in Seattle, the thing that I realized was that like whenever you make a good group of friends and whenever you truly have like a good social support around you, you're able to like live. But it's even then it's kind of scary and lonely. Mm-hmm. And so it's about understanding that and like kind of wrestling with it and feeling comfortable.
Right.
One of the sort of like, I guess a friend of mine told me this, and it's from a book. If you've ever read the book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, you'll know this. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. They say that there's two sort of states in life, right? There's euphoria and fear. If you're in any of these two states, then like you're doing something right. But if you're not in any one of these two states, you tend to start feeling comfortable. And whenever you start feeling comfortable, you get complacent.
Right.
So focus on opportunities where you feel like you're truly like scared or you feel like you're having a good time. Because at the end of the day, like everybody has like a finite amount of time to live, and like time is going to be the thing that's really going to get you. So don't spend your time doing things that you feel are not worthwhile, especially now whenever you're students, because like what's the worst thing that you can happen? Like getting an F on an assignment? Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of other things you can do that are way more valuable.
Right.
If you just take the risk.
Those sound like awesome lessons to learn. Last thing I want to probe in on is this, like you just mentioned, this feeling of, we only have so much time. That's quite a thing to be acutely aware of at 22 years old.
Yeah.
What do you think brought that on?
I think for me, the one thing that I've like slowly been realizing though, like even though I've said that, is that whenever you think about it, internships are designed to be sprints, especially tech internships, where it's like 12 weeks. You have one project and you have to ship that project. And it's like a pretty sizable project. Like I think in London, my project was like 5,000 or 6,000 lines of code, which is a lot. I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's a good metric.
But it's quite, it's not negligible.
It's substantial. It's not like something that's just, but careers are marathons. Mm-hmm. And so, because careers are marathons, you have the ability to kind of take risks because you can pick up slack somewhere else. But also, because careers are marathons, like not everybody is going to have the opportunity to like do like 4 internships. Like I got really lucky because what ended up happening is that I got my Facebook internship and then I got my drop internship and then I had nothing. So really, for the second half of PUI, like I could have been doing nothing. But I was fortunate enough that like I did well enough in my Facebook internship that I got a return offer, and then I was like very, very deliberate and very targeted about wanting to get Microsoft, and so I had like that locked down in September, and so like,
so to be clear, you had that locked down in September of 2017.
Yeah. For
an internship that started in the summer of 2018.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Very deliberate, very targeted. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at is like having an understanding of like the fact that like in school things are a rush, but over time in life, like things are kind of a marathon. You have to realize that like in that sort of scenario, like as you get older, you become more risk averse and you have more like, because you get less time to like make mistakes. So right now we have so much time to make mistakes. And so it's totally worth doing something high risk because you grow a lot more. Because nothing worth doing is easy.
Right. I guess one thing to wrap up on is now that you're done your PUI, you're kind of looking forward onto fourth year and beyond. Well, how does that feel, and what do you think it's going to look like?
Yeah, I'm super excited for fourth year. Fourth year is going to be awesome because it's like the pinnacle of like schooling. Yeah, like I personally love school. Like even though I don't like get really good grades, I love the environment that we're in school. I love the fact that we're learning constantly. I love the fact that we work on things. Like for me, like the most memorable thing in third year that happened was that we had a midterm, an assignment due at midnight, and an assignment due at 10 a.m. the next morning. So naturally, we pulled an all-nighter. We finished the assignment by like 8 a.m.-ish and went out for breakfast, and then we handed in the assignment, and we just collapsed. But that for me is like school. I love that. I love that. Like just that sort of energy and that sort of like vibe of like being in school and like constantly improving and learning. So I'm like super excited for school. Beyond that though, I'm like really scared. Like adulting is kind of scary. Graduating is like it's super scary because like in school there's like a predefined sort of like deadline. There's like a predefined sort of like rules and expectations. Whereas like in real life it's just like the wild wild west, and like it's a marathon, right? So at the end of the day, it's not the ending. You can't see the end. You just have to trust that every day you're doing the right things, and that's kind of scary, but it's exciting too because if school was life, then you never get anything done because at the end of the day, you have to like stop learning and start executing.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. You've said a lot over the past, over the course of this episode. It's been awesome talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I think that like if any students are listening to this, really make PUI a time that you can like learn and grow about yourself. Because at the end of the day, the thing about PUI that you're going to remember is not like the work you did, but rather the sort of growth and learning that you had. Because you're able, especially if you're able to kind of break it up or like do different things, you can really try and experiment and fail.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the worst that can happen? You go back to school.
Doesn't sound so bad.
Exactly. And it's awesome because never are you ever going to have like a year to like just do whatever without real consequences compared to like whatever you're out in the real world with yourself and you have to like take care of yourself and you have to, make sure that you're fed and all of that. And sure, while that is the case during PUI, worst case scenario, you can just go back to school and just continue on as though nothing happened.
Gotcha. I know you're quite passionate about helping people with the career things, and you're quite open as a mentor to just being a product of so many mentors. Is there any like good place people can reach you if they have questions?
Use the Facebook.
Facebook.
I love the Facebook.
Awesome. So, what's your name on Facebook?
So it's like fb.me/ms Manek.
MS Manek. Yeah. fb.me/ms.
But also, like, if you somehow tangentially know me, just feel free to try and get an intro. Like, I'm always super down to like talk to somebody, or if you don't know me, just like reach out. Like, the thing that I realize is that because I'm the product of like so many people who have helped me out, it's really important to pay it forward, and it's exciting because I feel now that like because I've gone through this experience, I'm in a position to help people who might be looking to do that, and I'm most excited to hear about how I can do that.
Well, that's awesome. I'm sure you'll have people reaching out.
Yeah.
All right. So that brings us to the end of this inaugural episode of That Thing I Did for a Year. I've been Ilya. We'll see you next time.